Well, good morning, everybody. My name is James Kemp. I'm Managing Director and member of the management team at AFME. I am delighted to welcome you all this morning to this AFME webinar, Driving European Innovation in the Digital Age. We want to get going, so I'm going to keep introductions to myself for everybody so that we get into the question and answer. But as you can see on your screens, we are delighted to have three fantastic speakers joining us today. We have Andrea Beltramello, who is a member of the Cabinet of the European Commission under Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis. He's a member of the Cabinet since 2018 and previously Deputy Head of the Communications Unit. He is extremely experienced and very involved in the digital agenda. We're delighted that he's with us. We have Ondřej Kovařík, a member of the European Parliament, and most importantly for our discussion today, rapporteur on the European Parliament Own Initiative Report on Digital Finance, entitled Digital Finance, Emerging Risks in Crypto Assets, Regulatory and Supervisory Challenges in the Area of Financial Services, Institutions and Markets. He is extremely knowledgeable in this space and has been heavily involved, as we know, in recent times. And then also, we are delighted to be joined by one of our members as well, Dolores Ramos Martínez, Public Policy Senior Manager at Banco Santander. She has more than 20 years experience in this space, having been in asset management, retail, global corporate banking, and again, very involved with a number of groups in the digital agenda arena. We are going to kick off this morning with a few opening remarks from Andrea and then followed by Ondřej, a few minutes each. We will then move into questions from myself to the presenters, who we are all very keen to hear from. For those in the audience, we would love to have questions from you, and you can submit those online and we'll pick those up as the conversation goes. We have an hour, so it'll be fast and furious, and so I would like to get going with this today. So without any further sort of talking, etc., I would love to hand over firstly to Andrea for a few opening comments, and then we'll move to Ondřej, and then we'll be getting into the discussion. So Andrea, good morning, and over to you.
Good morning, James. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's very exciting, and I have to say it's a very timely event, because the European Commission is going to adopt its digital finance package just the day after tomorrow. So I think this is a very timely event to speak about this topic, because we are coming out with our strategy very soon. And so why are we talking about this? Why is the Commission having this as a priority? Because simply we think that the future of finance is digital. With this package, we really want to make the most of the opportunities that digitization and technological innovation offer to everybody, to all Europeans, to all consumers, to all European companies, including in the financial sector. So I think this was very clear during the pandemic and the lockdown. So we see how digital technologies helped consumers and businesses to access financial services remotely, for example, allowing them to make payments online, and even for those who previously had not really used this kind of opportunity. So it has really been a game changer in that respect, but it's not something we think which is temporary, it's something which is going to last. And indeed, also for the long term and for the economic recovery after the pandemic, we think it is important that the financial sector really embraces the digital transformation. We think this is important for consumers because it can offer them better financial products. It's also important for businesses because we think that this can open new channels of funding for them. At the same time, we are also very mindful of the potential risks to investor protection, to money laundering and financial fraud, to cybercrime, to market integrity, and we really want to be sure that we have this balance where we also mitigate these risks. So maybe just very briefly to give you a curtain raiser and a first kind of insight into what our package will include. And here I have to say it's also very timely that we're speaking with Ondřej, because I mean his report on digital finance has been very important for us, for the Commission, in preparing our package, and I know that there has been an excellent cooperation between the European Commission and the European Parliament in this respect. As I said, we have different elements to this package. The first one is an overarching digital finance strategy, which has the objective to make Europe's financial services more digital friendly and to stimulate innovation and competition among financial services providers in the EU. There will be several elements, several actions into this strategy, but in a nutshell, we want, first of all, to address the fragmentation in the digital single market, because we have a lot of very successful fintech startups. We need to give them the tools to be able to scale up their operations, to be able to operate in a bigger market. And also, we want consumers to be able to access better financial services also across borders. So it's about tearing down barriers in the digital single markets. We also want our rules, our financial services rules, to be fit for the digital age, while at the same time ensuring a high level of consumer protection, as I was saying before. And I'm sure you can think about many different technologies to which these apply, such as artificial intelligence applications in finance or big data analytics. So we will be looking at all of that. Speaking about data, data management is also very much at the heart of our strategy. This is also in line with the Commission's broader data strategy. We want to facilitate business-to-business data sharing, promote open finance, and of course, at the same time, making sure that we maintain our very high standards on privacy and data protection. And finally, we want to make sure that we have all the tools to address new challenges that come with this digital transformation. And here, and I think this is something that we will surely talk about more later, is to always keep in mind the principle of same activity, same risks, and same rules, especially when it comes to safeguarding the level playing field between incumbents and new entrants. Maybe I will stop right here in the interest of time. We also have a part of our package, a retail payment strategy. We have some legislative proposals, some first concrete deliverables on crypto assets, on digital operational resilience in the financial sector. But maybe I can say a few more words about that as we proceed with our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. That was an excellent little tour de table with in 5 minutes, and given that you made reference to the excellent work there that Ondřej has done, perhaps we'll move swiftly to you, Ondřej, for a few thoughts around this as well. So thanks very much, Andrea. Ondřej.
Thank you, James. Yes, I hope you can hear me and everything is working fine.
Good.
Thank you, James, and thank you, AFME, for organizing this event. I cannot agree more with what Andrea has just said. It's very timely, and it's actually very good moment to raise those issues, especially because I can really feel, not only because of our work in the European Parliament, but also with regards to what the Commission is about to publish this week, that there is now a momentum actually to discuss digital financial services and the way we should approach it from the, let's say, EU regulator, but EU policymaker point of view. And on one hand, and the other hand, I think also, and it was mentioned rightly so by Andrea in his introductory remarks, with what is happening in economic reality this year, closely linked to the pandemic and actually various lockdowns and measures that were taken, I think we can really see the accelerating need from both consumers but also companies and business sector actually to fast forward and accelerate also innovation in field of financial services. And I'm definitely very much grateful for that, because I truly believe the European Union has much to offer in this regard, also on, let's say, international and global scene. But we really need to also look into what sort of, obstacles or what kind of sort of barriers we still have in the internal market, and what we can do on the other hand actually to help the sector grow and help them to innovate. It was actually very, very good to hear from Andrea the various let's say key pillars of the forthcoming Commission strategy. To be honest, and I would like to also thank the Commission for the cooperation. I think it very much sort of interlinks with the report that our Committee for Economic and Monetary Affairs in the European Parliament has adopted some not even 2 weeks ago, where we very much focus on issues that would, I think, take quite a substantial part of the Commission proposal on the crypto assets. But also, I think in general, we have a number of, let's say, general considerations regarding the fintech sector as in general, which we hope that would be also addressed by the Commission strategy, so that we can have sort of a revival of policy action in the field of financial services in the European Union, and I'm truly grateful for that. And I can also say that at least on behalf of the team that was working on the report, I think we are ready to sit down together with other institutions and with the industry and talk about the priorities, what we can do in order to make the policy action happen in reality. Maybe just a couple of general comments before we maybe in the further discussion address some of the concrete points. Indeed, I think the digitalization is now the key word for the financial services. Maybe now even more than ever. I think it's very much in line with, let's say, the general policy trends we are following in the European Union. And also, if we look at the discussion on the future European budget, but also, let's say, the recovery facilities, the digitalization in general is one of the, let's say, basic and key trends that will be followed. So I think the financial services here cannot be omitted. Definitely, there is a number of issues where we need to really sit down and see what we can do together as European Union. There was mentioning this, the real work on the digital single market, and it was also, I think, fully in line with what Ursula von der Leyen said in her State of Union speech last week. We really need to look into internal market. What are the obstacles that are still there? I think we, especially in the area of financial services, we have a number of issues that we really need to discuss regarding the fragmented market, but not only in the way that it's organized, but also in the way it's supervised, and also in the way that, for example, different types of regulation, even those that already have a European level legislation, in the way that are actually implemented and sort of supervised in various and respective member states. There's a lot of differences in there. Okay. And the other thing, just one last thing. I'm sorry, maybe I'm too long, but James, Andrea mentioned financial services as a let's say new opportunity for financing of businesses, and I think this is a very important line to develop, and I think this is also something that we would like to be as European Parliament your partner and actually help to find new ways how to get more capital to the economy over there. And I'm finished here. I think I'll be happy to discuss concrete points.
Thank you, Ondřej. I think it's all very, very relevant. I think we all see that, not just the pandemic, but the ability for CMU. I mean, Dolores, you are on the other side. Obviously, you're a bank who is delivering into this. I mean, your initial reaction to the idea of same risk, same activity, same risk, same regulation. Do you have, how do you see it from your side?
Yeah, well, this is extremely important in a moment where boundaries across sector are completely blurred. I mean, you can provide different kinds of financial services, or you can even get into the financial services market without being a provider. For example, by controlling different infrastructures that are key to the market, and then you can really get, I mean, the money from the market, extract the value from the market without actually being a financial service provider. So with this reflection in mind, it's extremely important to really keep in mind the same services, same risks, same regulation, and I would add same supervision, which is extremely relevant. We have a couple of main areas in which this is very important. One is prudential rules. Of course, it is very important to level up for certain players which are entering the market and which have the potential to create systemic risks and need to be regulated and supervised. And I think we go in the good direction in this area, because it's obviously very important, and it's very natural. But we also need to make sure that traditional entities can also innovate. I mean, when you're a bank for everything you do. Even if you create a startup, you have all the regulatory boundaries that all startups have, but you have additional boundaries because you're a bank. And I'm not talking about capital liquidity. I'm talking about, you know, governance requirements, 3 lines of defense, the procedures you have to get through when you want to launch a new product and things like that. These ones are really making us very hard to compete. We take 3 times more than a fintech to get our products in the market. And this cannot happen because this is detrimental to us banks, but it's also detrimental to all customers that have decided to do financial services with their banks. No, so well, this is something that has to be tackled, and sometimes it's only the governance arrangements that we need to fulfill, because they don't leave a lot of room for proportionality. Even if the regulation thinks we can, it's impossible then to apply it. The other one, which is very important, and sorry, James, it's data sharing. We cannot talk about level playing field when we banks are opening more and more our data without the same level of agreement from other areas. I mean, that's customers' data is not a company's data, but the customer would be much more, will have much more opportunities if doing financial services. We can count not only on financial products data, but on other data, which is very relevant for fulfilling our objective.
That is very interesting, and I think we had a question there, Dolores, that you may have just seen talking about big data, which sort of suggests, you know, sharing all bank data with big techs. But I think what you're picking up on there a little bit is it goes the other way too. So big techs perhaps sharing their data back into banks. Ondřej, just sort of quick thoughts on 2 things that Dolores has raised there. You know, the reality of the same risks, same activities regulation, you know, you're a big bank, your ability to do a startup is actually quite limited because you have the burden of being a bank. That's one question. So should there be some sort of carve out capability? And secondly, on this data, almost a 2-way data sharing. Any thoughts on that, Andrea, and then followed by Ondřej, perhaps?
Thank you, James. Thank you, Dolores, for raising those points. Indeed, they are really at the heart of our strategy, and I think we will be grappling with those issues for the years to come, because they're really very relevant both for financial institutions, let's say for the incumbents, if I can call it that way, and for the new entrants. I think it will be important for us to really go through all financial rules, to look at all the prudential rules that Dolores mentioned, to look at all the conduct of business rules, and making sure that they're really future-proof and that they're really adapted onto the new financial ecosystem which is emerging. So that they include at the same time both the traditional regulated financial institutions and the technology providers that are offering financial services. I mean, we see that these new entrants are now already offering a lot of payment services and related services, but we also hear a lot, and we heard it a lot in our public consultation on the digital finance strategy, that people expect online provision of other financial services, such as loans, such as insurance, asset management. This will develop, and we see already the large technology companies are acting as intermediaries, and they bundle this kind of products they offer to their clients. And obviously, this raises some issues because they're very big, they have a very large user basis, and this can really change market structure. So this can also have an adverse effect on competition. And then also, not only these IT companies provide financial services themselves, but they also provide to financial companies some services such as hardware, software, cloud, and so on. So this is why I think it will be very important for us to do this whole analysis of the financial services legislation as it stands today, and make sure that it is still fit for this new ecosystem. When it comes then to data sharing in particular, I maybe just to be clear, for us, promoting business-to-business data sharing in the financial sector is a priority. So we think that by the end of this Commission's mandate in this Parliament's term, the EU should have in place an open finance framework. This is already in line with the EU data strategy, with the upcoming Data Act, with the Digital Services Act. And we want to build basically on the model of the Payment Services Directive, which already has this concept of open banking. We think this is in the end beneficial for consumers. It can give them better financial product. So we will propose legislation on a broader open finance framework. At the same time, I would also like to stress that we are already reviewing competition policy to ensure that it is fit for the digital age. We will also see whether we need sector-specific measures to ensure fair access to platforms for all financial service providers, including existing financial service providers. So I think, we will be very mindful of having a balanced approach to open finance, which provides opportunities, but at the same time safeguards level playing field and competition.
And then that's excellent, Andrea, and we'll come back to some of those in a minute, I am sure. Ondřej, thoughts from your side as you've obviously worked through a lot of this as a rapporteur, and some of the goals that you've had in this space of business to business, and to some extent we're talking a little bit more here on the wholesale side, though I realise the lines of the retail blur, but some of this same risk, same activity, and some of the points Dolores raised. Perhaps thoughts from you, Ondřej.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think those are very important points that we wanted to address. Obviously, would be more in favor actually to have this approach of same activities, same risks, and same rules. Just in order to you have to sort of also provide for a level playing field in the area. But at the same time, I think when we look at the regulatory framework itself, it is also about leaving enough room for maneuver, for innovation, for introducing new technologies to keep it neutral and open and forward looking. So I think that would be the very thin balance actually to strike in our debates in the future. But let me just maybe also address very quickly the data issue, because I think to be honest that this is something that is and will be crucial. And obviously we have initiatives from the European Commission, such as data strategy, which will be the general one. But I think we should really look into the data issue in the area of financial services, especially when we talk to when we talk about, again, the level playing field with regards between, let's say, the legacy or just typical financial services providers, financial institutions, and especially big techs, because the data here will be the key driver for the innovation. If we are not able actually to tap the potential of the data and the big data analytics we have also in the financial services, we may end up in a situation where those who already have and use the ability to gather and analyze big chunks of data from various sectors, not only from financial services, can actually use them for much accelerated innovation. And I think we really need to find a good approach from the EU level to this question, because this is something where if we don't have an appropriate answer, we will just lose the race quite fast.
Yeah, thank you, Ondřej. And there's a couple of data questions come in, which I'm going to come to in a second, perhaps under a different wrapper. I think it's sort of, when I look at things, one of the challenges we've had in the last 10 years with all the new regulation that's come in has been fragmentation. So while people talk about a global solution to, for wholesale banking, regulation, etc., the reality is that what we see perhaps from the bank side is that it's global as long as it's European, or it's global as long as it's American, or it's global as long as it's Asian. So I think that fragmentation is a question that we always have, in particular with something like technology, which is clearly very global, and data is very global. Do you think we're in danger of having a fragmented sort of EU technical sovereignty issue, where that technical sovereignty actually results in Fortress Europe and the data is more localized, so we stop the free flow of data? Is that something, Dolores, that you have thoughts on? And more generally on fragmentation, I think, rather than just data.
Yeah. Well, it's a very, very interesting question, James, as you put it, because it's obviously we're making all of our efforts to do something at EU scale, which is very, very important, so that we can provide services across Europe. Like fintechs have barriers, we also do. But it's also very, very important to keep in mind what's happening outside the EU, although we cannot control it. The EU was very brave to launch Gdpr, for example, but then and then try to set the standards, and it's followed by many countries, and it's a fact. And I'm particularly very proud of this regulation. But the fact is now we have problems with the privacy shield. Because it's not, it's not been agreed at global level. It's true that sometimes you cannot wait for this to be agreed until you put that in place, and you have to focus at your area of control. But sometimes it's also very important that we talk about things at international level before moving. No, so it could be the case, for example, for certain products like and areas like crypto assets. It's important that Europe moves, but it's also important that it plays its role for making international standard setters to move at the same pace, no? And ICT risk is global per nature, so we have also to as Europeans, to make all the efforts to try and move the rest of standard setters in order to play together, because the bad guys collaborate very well. We need to collaborate not only at European level but also at international level. I know it's difficult, but it's something that we cannot lose. And it's also very important for the day-by-day of global entities such as Santander and others that try to, serve customers in a global manner, and it's really difficult to do that in a fragmented regulatory environment.
Excellent, thanks, Dolores. Thoughts on that, Andrea? Come to you first. How did that fragmentation issue? Clearly, we have an EU market which we want standardization across. I completely agree with that. To underpin CMU and digital and green, etc. We need that. But how did that come into your minds as when you did your report, thinking about the global nature of technology? Perhaps you, Andrea, and then come back to you, Andrea, with the sort of commission hat on Ondřej, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I think it's actually a very important point, and we had a lot of discussions about these. And I think, James, you maybe intentionally you sort of painted the most extremes. So either we are closed in a bubble in the European Union, and we regulate and we don't care about what's happening outside, or we just leave ourselves completely to the fragmented international scene. And I think the right approach should be somewhere in the middle. I mean, Dolores pointed out to GDPR. I think we have some let's say principles, some sectors where we can do much in the EU just by talking to each other, but then sort of have a sort of inspiration on the international level by setting some of the standards. Let me give you an example. I truly believe, for example, in cybersecurity, we can do a lot in working together in the European Union, and also then pushing let's say our standards outside of the European Union, because we need to. There's many actors in this area who are actually international. They are outside of EU jurisdiction. So unless we really talk to our partners, we won't be able to achieve anything. Issues such as anti-money laundering legislation, etc. I think there's a lot of that where we can actually have this inspiration. But I think we really need to be very much active, and this is one of the messages of the report. We also call on the Commission, but also other institutions, to be very active on international scene, using platforms such as OECD, but also informal formats such as G7 or G20, and sit down with our partners and discuss the international standards, because I think financial services more than any other sectors are internationalized. Sorry. So I mean, this is something where we really need to sit down and talk to our partners in order to avoid such situations as Dolores mentioned, the uncertainty of Privacy Shield arrangement right now. I think this is something that maybe we would like to avoid in the future, but at the same time, to put the EU on the forefront of the international discussion, being there, and also be clear on what we want on the international level from our partners.
Okay. No, I think that's very clear as an approach, Ondřej. I mean, what are your thoughts, Andrea? The work that the Commission has done here has obviously been very leading, some excellent views, thoughts, etc. I mean, how have you dealt with some of these questions around sort of the fragmentation, but also the international agenda as well?
Well, actually, I have to say I don't have much to add to what Ondřej said, because I agree very much with him on everything he said. I think already to get where we are today, we work very closely to our international partners. This is maybe something that is a bit overlooked, but I can assure you that the Commission has been working very closely with other jurisdictions in the Financial Stability Board, in the G7, in the G20, in Basel. So we have been dealing a lot with issues around digital finance in general, crypto assets, cybersecurity, and more generally data sharing. So all these issues we have already coordinated very closely with our partners. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't move forward if we see a need to do so to address certain challenges that we see as important. So we want to be as close as possible to our international partners, but we also want to lead. Okay, Dolores mentioned GDPR. Yes, I mean, there have been some teething issues, but I think that we are also proud of the fact that GDPR has become the global standard in data protection. And when you look at crypto assets, for example, we have a very fragmented market here in Europe that creates issues, not only issues of consumer protection, but also issues of not reaping all the benefits that these new instruments can bring. And this is why we think it's important that we come with our own rules. It's also a matter of having really a single market. So it's more about enabling and empowering rather than stifling. So I think it's very important also for us to look at this perspective, and maybe we will become also a global leader in regulating these issues. And of course, we are happy to continue speaking with our global partners to find the right balance between the different trade-offs that we are grappling with.
Okay, excellent. I mean, I think you picked up on something there, Andrea, which I would like to perhaps come to Dolores on, which is that there is clearly, and I think this is where we want to get to, let's look at the positive. There is clearly a great ability for digital finance to really underpin growth, provide new opportunities, whether that's on new issuances, on new products, on providing more streamlined services to end users. I mean, there are huge benefits to what technology can do. And I think we've seen that, as you both mentioned or all mentioned, during the pandemic. Dolores, if you had to look at certain areas that would be the most helpful to sort of improve the client, and I talk there about the wholesale side and also perhaps the retail to some extent, but really on the wholesale side, which areas that will really help underpin sort of an improvement in the end user experience? For example, is it AML, more streamlined KYC AML? Is it data? What are the things that you think will really help, let's just say from a European position, in terms of economic growth, client experience, etc.? Where would you place your main efforts, do you think?
Well, I'm happy to say that I'm quite aligned with Andrea on the main areas in which authorities should focus at, and I'm very happy to see from him to hear from him that these are the lines in which they are working. I think it's very important to look at the area of onboarding, because it's the first line where you really, the first impression you get from your bank is when you onboard. So if this is extremely difficult, then you have you have the risk that customers see you as the Mary Poppins banks instead of the digital banks we want to be. So that's very important, and that has to be solved at European level, and this is extremely relevant. But there are also others, like for example the area of, you mentioned in terms of capital markets, maybe crypto assets is going to be very important, because this is one of the areas in which we put a lot of, we know it's going to be extremely important for capital markets. We know it has a lot of potentials, and we are already starting to do so. So it's important that it's properly regulated. It doesn't mean we have to change everything. It has to be, of course, principles-based, regulated, and also in terms of adaptation to the technological pace. So that's why I say it's good. It's principles-based, but then regulators also have to look at precise changes that they might need to do in terms of adaptation of the regulatory framework. Here, there's a very nice, very interesting case, because some years after MiFID II was approved, now we find that the definition of financial instruments needs adaptation. Even that. So it's a good example of how we need to focus at the future whenever we regulate. It's also it doesn't mean we need to change everything every time there's a new innovation in the market. It's like we need to adapt the rules that are already in place, and maybe launch some others when new risks are found, like for example systemic risks or others, or risks for consumers or investors. Those are the ones that need to be tackled, but not changing everything at any time. And I think we have a very good example in ICT risk, because it's principles based, and even the testing is very practical. It's like this kind of rules we need, this kind of regulation we would for everything. I think this has to be, said like that, and really needs to stay like it is. And serve, as an example for the rest of rules we want to do in this area.
Okay, Very good. Thanks, Dolores. Yeah, I mean, I think that raises an interesting question there. You talked about ICT risk, and that quickly makes me think of things like outsourcing, which clearly in the world of digital finance, we've seen the robustness that have been provided by some of the outsource capabilities that exist at the moment. But of course, that brings with it its own risks and potentially concentration, etc. Any thoughts around what I'm sure will be a topic going forward, a sort of idea of outsourcing, third-party, cloud, etc. Andrea, thoughts around that from yourself?
Yes, definitely, James. And indeed, I mean, Dolores raised a very important issue, which will be part of our legislative proposal on digital operational resilience in the financial sector. Because we see indeed that there has been a lot of outsourcing, which is good because it allows banks and other financial institutions to really focus on what they know how to do best. It's more efficient, it reduces costs for everybody, it increases productivity. I mean, it's a good thing, really. But at the same time, we see that there is a gap. We see that there is a gap because at the moment, financial supervisors simply do not have the powers to address risks that may arise at the level of ICT third-party providers. So we think it's important to fill this gap, and this is why we will be proposing also some harmonized rules, which will be subjecting critical ICT third-party providers to an oversight framework EU level. And here again, I think it's important to stress that we will adopt a very proportionate approach, depending very much on the size and the potential systemic impact of those risks. And we will try to strike the right balance as well between a EU level oversight framework, because again, by definition, these activities are cross-border, while at the same time making sure that national supervisors are very closely involved so that basically we can really exploit the best synergies between the two different levels. And if you allow me just very briefly to react to something that Dolores said, again, indeed, you mentioned MiFID and financial instruments and our way that we have to look at financial instruments. When we designed MiFID, we couldn't expect that we would be facing today the opportunities and the risks posed by crypto assets. So that's precisely the good example of why we need our financial services rule to be fit with these new developments. This is why we're proposing a regulation on markets in crypto assets, which will cover all those crypto assets that currently fall outside of EU rules. And we will have a separate set of rules, a separate regulation, which concerns those crypto assets which already qualify as one of the categories that we define in our financial rules, such as a financial instrument under MiFID, but where the rules are not fit for purpose and where we need to clarify the rules. And we also need to provide some space for innovators, for market operators to test new ways to exploit really the benefits of, for example, the blockchain technology. That's the approach that we're taking.
Very interesting, Andrea, and I'll come back to something there in a second. Just while I have everyone online, please do post some questions if you would like us to answer them. We're trying to pick them up as we go through, so please post them. So, Ondřej, just coming off the back of the comments of Dolores and Andrea, I mean, your thoughts as you did your work on how to, if you like, use existing regulations. And I think I'm paraphrasing correctly, Andrea, you would like to see, if there are existing regulations, they should be used. We shouldn't have new regulations just for the sake of it, but there may be the need for expansion in certain instruments, for instrument definitions like in MiFID, or there may be a need for new regulations. But from what I'm hearing, Andrea, your thoughts are we should use existing regulations where we can, rather than just invent new rules for the sake of it. And Ondřej, if that's wrong, Andrea, then please sort of correct me. Ondřej, what are your thoughts around that approach? Is that similar to how you've approached things?
Yes, indeed, James. And I would basically follow up to let's say, your interpretation of how the regulatory work should be structured and organized. I think it would make sense, and when we look at the reality, there is actually a number of financial instruments, let's say, in the area of crypto assets or digital currencies, which would, after an analysis, would basically follow into the scope of some of the existing regulations we already have in place, and maybe we would need to, adjust them. But I mean, in principle, they do, and I think that should be also the basis of our work, not to invent a brand new regulatory framework for everything that we believe needs to be regulated in the financial world, but to see whether we already have an existing regulation that would fit to some of those. And for those, let's say, instruments that would not be covered by anything that is already in place, then we would, introduce a new regulatory framework. And we also had these discussions. That is why one of the messages of the report that our committee has adopted, it was a call for an open, comprehensive EU-wide taxonomy of crypto assets, where we can actually say, look, we can classify and define what these respective crypto assets are, and whether, and this is to follow up to your question, whether we can already have them covered by existing regulation better than something that would need to be introduced. And we'll be happy to look into details of the Commission proposal later this week. But I think the combination of both would be a smart approach. And just one very short comment on what Dolores said. Very important thing, and I think this would be actually good to have it as one of the outcomes of this breakfast. It's actually the digital identity issue, the digital onboarding. I think this is something that is crucial, and I think this should be one of the work strands that on the EU level we should accelerate our activities and the policy action in there. I think if we really want to avoid a fragmented market, we should see whether we can work something more appropriate for customer experience when it comes to, for example, a European digital identity based on new technologies that are available, and whether we are actually able to propose to customers, be it a retail customer or a company, something that can actually enhance and facilitate their customer experience while granting cyber, let's say, the security aspects, and at the same time sort of help the innovation to grow.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Now, we've sort of talked about the topic I want to cover now in various different ways, which is how do you bring about innovation in a way that is safe and secure, but also doesn't preclude perhaps the banks from being able to get involved because they're governed by very, let's say, stringent and heavy regulation because they're banks, but doesn't also allow others to perhaps get in the fast lane through lower levels of regulation. So I'm going to touch on the topic of sandboxes. So let's have a play in a sandbox for a minute. How do you deal with sandboxes? Because what we see is that technology companies can very quickly gain significant traction. So you let a technology company loose and it can move very quickly and gain large amounts of customers, clients, and perhaps touching on retail there a little bit more. But are sandboxes a good thing, or are they something that perhaps belongs to a previous era of innovation? Any thoughts on that? Andrea, why don't we start with you? Just a few thoughts from yourself.
Yes, thanks, James. Indeed, I think this question about how to facilitate innovation, how to promote closer contacts between the traditional, let's say, financial entities, the new entrants, and the supervisors is a very important one. And it goes back to the point that I was making at the beginning about allowing firms to scale up in the digital single market. So we have already created actually a European Forum of Innovation Facilitators, and we will be looking at kind of upgrading the sort of cooperation between supervisors and financial companies and fintechs. So we want to create a new way of collaboration, a digital finance platform where basically the companies can more easily test their ideas and the supervisors can learn from that. And we think this new collaboration platforms will be very important to mainstream digital technologies in finance. We also recognize that this sometimes may require some, let's say, changes in rules or some exemptions. I think it's important to do that, but doing it in a very safe way. And here I'm going back to what I was mentioning before when it comes to crypto assets. One of the two legislative proposals that we will put forward will be specifically on those crypto assets that are already covered by financial rules, but simply financial rules were not designed with those instruments in mind. So we want to create a safe space for innovators to test those new ideas under control of the supervisor, so that also the supervisors can learn. We can do it through a system of temporary exemption from certain existing rules, and making sure, therefore, that we promote these innovations while at the same time keeping the risks in check. So this is something that we will, for the first time, introduce now with crypto assets. But why not? This could be something that could be tested for other areas as well.
Okay, perfect. And Dolores, you have sort of direct experience. I'm aware we've got a few questions coming in, so we'll try to get to those in the last few minutes. But Dolores, just on sandboxes, helpful or perhaps something from a previous era?
I think it's still helpful because there's still a lot to do to open the minds of supervisors and also to reflect all together about regulations. And even open the minds of banks themselves. No, when we go and test new products, we all learn. We had this experience in the UK sandbox through Santander UK, and it was really positive for us to understand how to do things in a digital agile manner, while at the same time looking at the areas of risk that the supervisors were in their mind. No, the only thing is it's true that when you and I have in mind the Libra case, which came some months ago, and then you could see that the sandbox could be a test area for them. And that could open the space for others coming to the market very quickly. But well, my experience is Libra has already had their sandbox. I mean, the day after they announced that they would be launching the Libra project, all the supervisors in the world were seated with them, asking them questions, and even from my point of view, helping them build their business case and regulatory case, no, doing their compliance work. So it's happening. Whenever a big player will knock the door, they will have their own sandbox. It's not gonna be formal. It's gonna be informal. I've been them in front of the FSB. I wasn't in this session, but I know they were there, and they had a special session with the FSB, FinNect. So at the end of the day, we are not gonna stop them having this good access by stopping the sandboxes. So I think it's good to have sandboxes. I mean, we have to work for the next 5 years, but we have also to work for the next year, and we need to keep on collaborating among ourselves and also with the supervisors to them too, for learning together.
Thanks. And I guess there, one of the points I would sort of flag is that those sandboxes, if they do exist, should cover not just one single area, let's say prudential or customer support protection, but of course many of these span multiple areas like money laundering, financial fraud. So you need to be able to cover, for these new entrants, the full end-to-end set of services that we see. I've got a couple of questions here that I might just direct to you, Ondřej, very quickly, and perhaps Andrea, because it's sort of to do with the Commission as well. One is the digital ID. Is the European ID, is it going to be European-wide, not just EU? Interesting question there. How well are the conversations going there to have a European-wide digital ID? And then there's a second question, which is really hearing about crypto assets, but should there be championship of European blockchain providers? That comes to the question of actually technology neutrality. So two things there, perhaps very quickly before we have a wrap up. Ondřej, thoughts around digital ID for Europe rather than just EU, and then whether we should be looking at seeking blockchain champions in Europe, or whether that goes to the technology neutrality point.
Thank you, James. Thank you for the questions. I think those are very relevant. Well, EU and Europe. I think what we should try to do, and this is also based on the experience of let's say some of the operators from the industry covering various member states. We already have in some member states digital identities, but they are not actually talking to each other much. So and this could be a problematic part. So then the question, and I mean we are not that far yet, but I think the debates are actually taking place, is whether we can actually sort of have an additional level, so that you can have also your EU identity, which can actually help you to access services in various member states. So that I think could be the work strand and the line of ideas to develop, and I'll be definitely favor of initiatives in this regard. I'm sorry, the second question was about the...
What should we be looking at? And I know we're getting short of time, but is it blockchain we should be looking at as champions for Europe, or is it a broader crypto assets? Your thoughts on whether we should be, looking more broadly technology neutral, or whether we should be looking at leaders? And I know I want to bring Andrea
I don't think we should close the doors to any technology. I think this is about the future looking and forward looking concept. But I think we should also see if there are benefits of some of the existing technologies that are already used, and let's say to promote their use. But obviously, the policy action and the regulatory framework should be forward-looking, should be open, should be technologically neutral. Because if you want to have them fit for purpose in 5 to 10 years, we just cannot link it to one single technology.
Brilliant. No, that's very clear. Thank you, Ondřej. So we have 3 minutes left. I promised I would finish you all at 10 o'clock. So, Andrea, the floor is yours. Just a few final comments, and I know you have thoughts around sort of the broader Libra, etc. So over to you, Andrea.
Yes.
And then we'll wrap up the others.
Just very briefly, I wanted to say that on digital identity, we do want to have a sound legal framework that enable those tools for onboarding. So we need, of course, to have more harmonized AML and counterterrorism financing rules. And we want to base it on our existing framework for electronic identification and trust services for electronic transactions, so the so-called eIDAS regulation. So we can do it at EU level. It can only go beyond EU if there is a very harmonized set of rules that apply in this area. So at EU level, for sure, it's possible, but beyond, I'm not sure. It depends on how close we can get the regulatory frameworks. And yes, one final thought on Libra. Just to say that indeed we want to promote this kind of innovations. They're happening anyway. They're happening in the private sector. Central banks are also looking at central bank digital currencies. We need a proportionate approach. Our framework will cover so-called stable coins. They will be part of our rules. We need a proportionate approach. So different rules are based on the systemic impact that a stable coin, for example, could have. If you take a stable coin potentially like Libra and the huge user base of that it could have, it's not the same as a small stable coin that is maybe being developed and we don't know somewhere in the EU. So yes, we will have rules because we need clear rules. At the moment, there are no rules. We cannot allow Libra to be rolled out in Europe without those rules, but they will be very proportionate and well calibrated.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrea, for those final thoughts. We have very short time, but Ondřej, any final comment from yourself before I shift to Dolores for a simple yes/no answer? Ondřej, any final thought from yourself?
I'm sorry, maybe just maybe you will hear some alarm in the background, so I don't know what is it. No, but
Not allowed to answer.
I think no, just maybe. Well, first, a big thanks for organizing this event, and maybe just a message. I truly believe that we have this momentum actually to go forward with financial services in Europe. I'm truly grateful that we have this possibility to discuss it, and there will be more like my wish. Let's keep the pace maybe, and let's not just get it lost in regulatory debates and some issues on some minor points, but let's really keep the pace. Let's have the policy action going, and let's really help to create the digital single market in financial services in the EU, which I think would be to benefit to all.
Thank you, Ondřej. So Dolores, a final quick answer from yourself. Are we heading in the right direction with all of this regulatory and this discussion that Ondřej and Andrea have very, very kindly worked with us today? Are we heading in the right direction as you, as an end user bank of many of these things?
Yes, I think so. I congratulate the Commission for looking at the good directions, and I really encourage them to keep on breaking the silo approach, collaborating with other authorities, especially with competition ones, and looking at the business models evolutions instead of only technologies. Technologies are also important, but the evolution of the business models based on data, for example, is critical, and I'm very happy that they are looking at these issues.
Very good. Well, look, we are now just a minute over. I would very much like to thank Ondřej, Andrea, and Dolores for what has been a superb morning of conversation, really thoughtful and extremely helpful, and you are clearly all extremely knowledgeable. So thank you once again for your time, and thank you to the audience for your questions and participation at this AFME webinar, and we hope to see you at the next one. So thank you very much, everybody, and good morning.